Wrapping up our AL Central Farm previews, we have the Minnesota Twins, who have some amazing prospects working their way through the minors and not a lot of spots at the major league level for them. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay, so looking at the Minnesota Twins, 87 and 75, a lot of interesting things to like in this farm system, but we are not going to be able to get to every interesting guy in this show. If there's somebody that you want to hear about that we didn't get to, let me know. We have spots in the Monday mailbag to stick some of these guys in there. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, shows on Twitter at Locked On Farm, and then every other way to reach us, Discord, email, all of that. It's in the episode description. It's in the show notes. Okay, the top two prospects, to me, they're in the same tier, and you're looking at shortstop Brooks Lee and outfielder Walker Jenkins. And the order you place those guys is all contingent on, do you value proximity or ceiling more? So Brooks Lee obviously has the proximity. First rounder in 2022 out of Cal Poly, 125 games between AA and AAA, 275, 347, 461 with 16 home runs and 58 extra base hits, 56 walks, 91 strikeouts, 7 of 11 on stolen bases. The thing for Brooks Lee, like I said, the biggest thing he has over the other option, Walker Jenkins, is the proximity. He could, I feel like realistically, because the floor is so solid, he could come up this year on opening day and plug into your middle infield. Now, obviously, you have Jorge Polanco at second, it's the final year of his deal. You've got Carlos Correa at short. You've got Royce Lewis at third base. So there's not an immediate spot for him right now, but I'm sure something will eventually open up. Injury, ineffectiveness, things like that. The thing for Brooks Lee is, like I said, the floor is really good. His contact ability, very good. 79% contact rate, 90% in the zone. Now, as a switch hitter, it does feel like his lefty swing is much more reliable and better than his righty swing. Still some work to do there, and if you want to give him some things to work on in the minors versus having him up on opening day, that's probably an area to address. The power for Brooks Lee, I don't actually think is anything more than maybe average, right? It's a 90 mile an hour average exit velocity, 103 on the 90th percentile exit velocity, which is right there with MLB averages. Average power, and that's the thing for Brooks Lee, is outside of that contact ability, everything's average to maybe above average. His foot speed is average, his arm strength, I'd probably say above average, his defense, average to above average depending on which position you're looking at. He's played mostly shortstop, as 111 games last year at shortstop, got 7 at third base, 6 games at DH, hasn't played second base, but it feels like at the major league level, if you're looking at where to stick him, he's going to end up being at second base because you have Royce Lewis and you have Correa. So high floor, ceiling might not be as high as some of the other options, but he's going to be a very good professional, it feels like, for a very long time. And he is absolutely the type of player that makes your major league roster better. So excited about Brooks Lee. Again, not a superstar, but a solidly above average player at the major league level, and that's really all you can ask for. Outfielder Walker Jenkins is the other option, and he's your number one prospect if you're into the ceiling of the tools versus proximity in the floor, right? So the first rounder last year in that top five, that big five guys there, 26 games after the draft between rookie ball and A ball, 362, 417, 571. 3 home runs and 12 extra base hits, again in 26 games for Walker Jenkins. 9 walks to 14 strikeouts, 6 of 9 on stolen bases. Offensively, The exit velocities were fine, nothing special, but again, he did all of this at 18 years old. The contact was really good. 82% contactability overall, 90% in the zone. And some of that is he doesn't chase a ton. He's got really good swing decisions. So you see the potential to grow into more power. There is projectability on that frame. And then also as he adjusts to Major League Baseball. From a defensive perspective, the arm is plus, the speed is plus. I feel like having watched a little bit of him in A-ball there with Fort Myers, the Mighty Muscles, it feels like he could stick in center field, but a lot of organizations have like a guy who is a very good defender, and you could conceivably push Walker Jenkins off of center field. In that case, he goes to right. It's still a really good profile for a right fielder. So he can play center. He's probably not going to, he's going to be a average to above average. He's not going to be a Gold Glover out there, but he can handle center field just fine at the major league level. But odds are you'll have another guy to play it over him. After those two guys, there's a little bit of a drop off before you get to some of the rest of the prospects in this system. And number 3 for me right now, given with some caveats of I feel like there's going to be a lot of movement in this list between now and the end of the season, is outfielder Emmanuel Rodriguez. Got 99 games in high A last year with a really interesting profile and statistical results. We've talked about him on the show plenty, so everydayers are familiar with who he is already. But Emmanuel Rodriguez in Cedar Rapids batted .240, .400, .463, 16 home runs, 38 extra base hits, 92 walks to 134 strikeouts, and 20 of 25 on stolen bases. The story for Emmanuel Rodriguez is he is incredibly patient at the plate, like a 36% swing percentage. And he really chases, like 16%. And when you get under 20%, you're looking at really disciplined on the chase. Now, the issue with that is Emmanuel Rodriguez's contact rate was also under 70%. So you're in this really weird bucket of he doesn't swing a ton, but when he does swing, he's not always making contact. Now, when he does make contact, tons of power. His 90th percentile exit velo was like 108. But my question is, how sustainable is this approach when you get into the upper minors? Was he incredibly passive because he knew that pitchers in high A, not enough of them could throw enough strikes to strike him out before he walked? Or what was it? And is the approach sustainable as he moves up? One of the interesting, I'm not going to say a comp, but one of the interesting comparisons that I got when I was talking to some people around the Twins about Emmanuel Rodriguez is Joey Gallo. And obviously, one, he's not the only player in the system that kind of got that comparison. Kalai Rosario, who we'll talk about in the third segment, he also got that comparison. But the comparison to Gallo was he's got a big arm and can play in the outfield. He has incredible power, great on base, but the batting averages are low because there's a natural swing and miss in the profile. So I'm really curious to see what Emmanuel Rodriguez does in Double A. Going to be watching a lot when he gets to Wichita. He should spend the entire year there, or at least start the year there. Really curious to see where his approach changes when he gets in front of a majority of pitchers that can legitimately execute a game plan, get in the strike zone against him, multiple different pitches, multiple times in an at-bat, and force him to be a little more aggressive. I think if he'd swing at the first pitch or the second pitch a little bit more, it would do him a lot of wonders, simply because when you watch his approach, he's not even looking to swing until it's 3 or 4 pitches into the at-bat. Curious to see how that changes when he gets to Double A. In just a minute, let's talk about some of the players you may see in 2024. There's a couple really interesting options here in this system. We'll talk about them next, right here on Locked On MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NFL regular season has wrapped up, but there's still time to get in on the postseason action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. It's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. You don't have to win the bet, you just have to place the bet. And once you do that and you get your bonus bets, you can go out there and look at some of the really interesting odds for this Minnesota Twins team. As of time of recording, the over-under on FanDuel in wins is 86.5. They were 87 and 75 last year, so right there in line with where they performed. They have the 5th best odds to win the American League at plus 850. And in the individual player awards, Pablo Lopez has the 4th best odds for American League Cy Young at plus 1100. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet today and secure your bonus bets with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, so looking at guys who you may see in 2024, and a couple of these guys have come up and had some interesting performances, but one that you haven't seen yet is utility man Austin Martin, 2021 first rounder out of Vanderbilt by the Toronto Blue Jays. He was moved in a trade over here to the Twins, and 59 games in AAA last year, 263, 387, 405. Had in just over 250 plate appearances, had 6 home runs and 17 extra base hits, 36 walks to 43 strikeouts, and 16 to 20 on stolen bases. I think the thing here for Austin Martin is the power is easily below average. It's 85 average exit velocity and 101 his 90th percentile. So it's below average power. You can see that in the slugging numbers. You can see that in the home run and extra base hit numbers. But what Austin Martin does give you is really good contact ability and some on-base ability. So his contact rate last year, 84% overall contact, 90% in the zone. So it's a higher floor as a contact and on-base bat, and he's got some defensive versatility. His speed is fine. You can see the 16 to 20 on stolen bases, but his arm prevents him from playing the left side of the infield. He's not going to be your shortstop. He's not going to be your third baseman. But he can play second, he can play center, he can cover some left as well. Last year, 35 games at second, 11 in center, 12 in left. If you're looking for an idea of the type of game he has, not a comp, but a stylistic thing, think about a guy like a Whit Merrifield, right? Somebody who can play second base, who can play the outfield, give you some decent defense, can get on base, can go first to third on a base hit, things like that. It feels like the way this roster's currently constructed, he's not a starter for the Twins. But when you look at the injury issues that Byron Buxton has had, who is projected as of now via Fangraphs to be the starting center fielder, something he couldn't do last year. And then you look at all of the different options in the infield, especially if you end up trading somebody like a Jorge Polanco, it feels like Austin Martin can have a role as a utility and bench bat on this team that can, if you have to play him for 4 straight days, you're not bothered about having to play him for 4 straight days, but he's not going to be your go-to everyday starter, right? Okay, right-hand pitcher Simeon Woods Richardson, one of those guys that has come up and has not necessarily performed. And when you look at what he's done, the big issue with him is the velocity has regressed. Another player that was traded in from Toronto, and he's now sitting low 90s on the fastball. It's 90, 91 miles an hour. He's got a slider. He's got a changeup, both in the low 80s. And what I've noticed is as the velocity has regressed, he has shifted to more of the changeup over the slider. He can locate these things well, but when he brings them in the zone, he gets rocked, right? And you saw that last year. His game hasn't translated to the upper minors. It hasn't translated to the major league level. I want to say his major league ERA is 8 or something stupid like that. And I'm really curious to see what happens this offseason. Is he healthy? And does he look more like the major or the future major leaguer we thought he was a few years ago and the Twins thought he was when they traded for him? What is going on there? A guy that I do feel like is pretty easily, yes, he is a future major leaguer, David Festa, 13th rounder out of 2021 out of Seton Hall, right-handed pitcher, got in 24 games, 22 starts between AA and AAA. Most of these were AA. 4-4 with a 4.19 ERA for Festa. 92 and a third innings, 119 strikeouts, so 11.6 per 9 to 42 walks. 4.1 per nine, and 9 home runs allowed. So just under 1 home run per 9 innings. When you look at what he's actually throwing, we talked in the Pirates show last week about what makes fastball shape, what makes a fastball have good shape, and it comes down to how much induced vertical break does it have up in the zone. If you can get a better than 16 inches, it's considered to be plus. If you can get above 18, it is elite. David Festa's fastball sits mid-90s, but he gets 20 inches of induced vertical break on it. So it is very good up in the zone. Now, it is somewhat of just a dead straight fastball. You do have that issue. It doesn't have a lot of movement either laterally. It's pretty much just dead straight, but it still is rather effective. He's 6'6", but the release point's a little bit lower. He gets good extension. It rides up in the zone really well, so it works. It's not like some of the other dead straight fastballs. I'm thinking Hunter Green of the Reds, where he doesn't have a lot of movement and it doesn't have great carry and gets rocked sometimes. David Festa's fastball is good. He's got a slider and a changeup. Both sit in the high 80s. Similar movements as far as slider going one way, changeup going the other. Similar velocity bands, but they work. I do wonder... Oh, and the changeup does really well off of the four-seam fastball. I think that's the better combo of a fastball and a secondary pitch is the changeup, but the slider is still effective. I do wonder if having some sort of vertical breaking pitch would be a welcome addition for David Festa. Something like a curveball, a vertical breaking curveball to kind of slot in between those other two secondary pitches. I think that would be a welcome addition. But either way, the things that he needs to do, he needs to throw more strikes. You see sometimes when he gets a little bit, 4 walks per 9 innings, he gets a little bit wild, misses the zone a little bit. And then he just needs better luck. Last year, his batting average on balls in play was almost 350. I feel like the ERA was not necessarily emblematic of how good of a pitcher David Festa is because he had some bad luck on balls in play. Again, 350 BABIP is significantly above average, even for the minors. So want to see some better luck there from him. Two guys that are interesting, but also flawed. We got to figure out what's going to happen here, and I don't know what kind of chances they'll get in 24. Right-hand pitcher Marco Raya and first baseman Junior Severino. So for Raya, 4th rounder in 2020 out of high school, 22 games, mostly in high A, but did get some in double A there. 0-4 with a 4.74 ERA in 62 2/3 innings. 65 strikeouts to 22 walks, and 6 homers allowed. He really struggled when he moved up to double A. The stuff is fine. Mid-90s fastball. Sweeper is in the mid-80s. He's got a vertical breaking curveball. It's a great combination, although you would love a changeup to get you that arm side movement. But again, really struggled when he got to double A, and then just really hasn't had a chance to work deep into games. Went back and pulled the game log for all 22 starts last year. His highest pitch count was 54 innings. And I'm not sure if he comes about and has a lot better stamina in games. I could see a scenario where you see him later in the year in 24, but there's just a question of he hasn't gone very deep into games. I'm not sure at what point in 24 you see him unless they put him in some sort of relief role in the bullpen late in the season because they need extra options. Junior Severino, another situation where you feel like you have better options than him, but you can see where he'd be useful. Hit 35 home runs in the minors last year, one of the home run leaders in the minors. But he also struck out 33% of the time, and his contact rate was under 65%. So, obviously, it feels if they had to figure out who are we going to play at first base, you'd rather move Julian over to first base and stick Brooks Lee at second if you were missing a piece or two and had to figure out how to cover first and second base versus promoting Severino. But if he comes out this year and has a renaissance on the contact ability, has a renaissance on the ability to avoid strikeouts, similar to what Luken Baker did with the Cardinals last year, there's absolutely space for them to call up Junior Severino and use him at the major league level. In just a minute, let's talk about some of the really interesting lower level prospects to watch, as well as our dart throw. We'll do that next right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. Final segment of Locked On MLB Prospects here on Saturday, talking about the Minnesota Twins. By the way, hello, Kyle, and your girlfriend. Okay, so Ryan pitcher Charlie Soto, first rounder last year out of high school, didn't pitch after the draft. Really curious to see what he does. I'm assuming the whole season at Fort Myers, but the stuff is really good. Fastball sits mid-90s, can touch 98. He's got a really good changeup and a slider, both in the same velocity band, similar to how David Festa's works with a really good fastball, slider, changeup in the same velocity band. So you wonder what pitches is he going to add in Major League Baseball? But obviously the main goal in 2024 is just get into professional ball, get innings, get experience before you start tweaking the pitch mix. But curious to see if they go and they try to give Soto a fourth pitch, something that moves vertically, or if they say David Festa's been good so far, so we're going to leave him with just these three. Curious there. A guy that you did see a little bit after the draft, and I'm honestly surprised more folks aren't talking about him. Third rounder, Brandon Winker. 17 games in rookie ball, 288, 338, 546. 4 home runs and 9 extra base hits. 4 walks to 23 strikeouts. So I understand the strikeouts were concerning, right? 0 for 1 on stolen bases. Tons of power. Obviously, very aggressive approach. And unlike a lot of the guys you've seen in this system, whether it was Julian, whether it was Emmanuel Rodriguez, Kalai Rosario, who we've got coming up later. Just so aggressive approach, but the power's really good. And then he's shown some amazing versatility. He's got plus speed and a plus arm. They played him at shortstop for 9 games last year. They played him in center field for 7 games last year. And you can see the ability. It's a higher ceiling version of a guy like Austin Martin. Instead of second base and outfield, shortstop and outfield with plus power. Obviously, it feels like he's going to eventually move off of one of those positions to focus on the other. But you can dream about a guy that would have amazing versatility for you, both in the infield and the outfield. Because again, the speed is plus, the arm is plus, the power is really good. You just have to tweak the approach. And I'm hesitant to say it's a bad approach on only 17 games in rookie ball. Could have just been nerves and trying to adjust to professional baseball. So I get it. Second pitcher Corey Lewis is an interesting prospect to me. 9th rounder in 2022 out of UC Santa Barbara. Made 22 starts last year, 9-4 with a 2.49 ERA in just over 100 innings, 101 in the third. 118 strikeouts, so 10.5 per 9, 233 walks, 2.9 per 9, 6 home runs allowed. He's got a lot of the different things you like as far as he throws strikes, he keeps the ball in the yard. It's a really interesting pitch mix as far as fastball sits in the low 90s, so the velocity is not amazing, but more than 20 inches of induced vertical break. So elite carry up in the zone, and it has half a foot of horizontal run as well. So very hard pitch to square up despite the velocity only being low 90s. Vertical breaking curveball. He's got a slider and change that both have shorter movement but different directions. So he's covering all 4 directions already. And he throws a knuckleball. It's not only a knuckleball, a lot of guys are already not used to seeing knuckleballs, but it's a really unusual knuckleball because of how hard he throws it. R.A. Dickey was one of the more noticeable knuckleballers in recent history because he threw it harder than a lot of other guys threw it, and he was often upper 70s on the knuckleball. Corey Lewis throws his knuckleball in the low 80s. I've never seen a knuckleball be able to be thrown this hard and still be as commanded as a knuckleball can be, right? He doesn't use it a ton. I think the most I've ever seen it in a start's 5 pitches, but just knowing he has it and knowing that at any time he can whip an 80-mile-an-hour knuckleball at you just really feels like it has a way of messing with opposing hitters. He's got all 4 directions covered. He's got a couple different velocity bands. And then he can just randomly throw a knuckleball up there. A really good knuckleball. It's not his primary, but again, a couple times a game, he can whip it out, and it works. It's got like the best swing and miss numbers of anything in his arsenal. Probably because you've been trying to adjust to this weird fastball up in the zone that moves in on you and also carries really well and cover all these different directions, and then in floats this knuckleball at the speed of the curveball. It throws you off. Yasser Mercedes, 2022 IFA, in a really interesting boat here, okay? Had a really great DSL last year. Batted .355 with 30 stolen bases. I think hit 4 or 5 home runs. And then had a 25-game sample in rookie ball because of injury, and it wasn't good at all. 196, 248, 381. 4 homers and 9 extra base hits. 23 strikeouts in 25 games. 6 of 7 on stolen bases. We need to see more. He's still on top prospect lists, but I think that the sample was small enough, only 25 games, where it's easy to assume he's not as bad as that sample. And it feels like a lot of the analysis has now become maybe he wasn't as good as what we saw in the DSL with that 3-4-5 slash line, but he's not as bad as what we saw in rookie ball. So really big year for him. I don't know if he's going to go back to rookie ball or go to Fort Wayne. I hope he goes to Fort Wayne, but we'll see what happens. There's not a lot of fans at rookie ball. There's not a lot of people there. It's not a great environment. And so I'm curious about that. And then defensively, he played center and left. The speed is good. The defense is good. His arm is not good. And if he doesn't stick in center, he's going to have to kick over to left field. I don't think he's going to be able to stay in right because the arm isn't necessarily great. But also, given this system, you would love a plus defender to be able to make it to the majors in center field because you've got a lot of guys like an Emmanuel Rodriguez, like a Walker Jenkins, guys at the major league level, like a Matt Wallner, who all fall into the corner outfield profile. You'd love to see a center fielder make it up. So big year for Yasser Mercedes. If he stumbles again this year, he's probably not even in this version of the show next year. Kalai Rosario. Let's talk about Kalai Rosario. 2020 fifth rounder out of high school. And another guy, when I was talking to folks to prep for the show, that we got Joey Gallo comparisons on. 118 games in Cedar Rapids. Just over 525 at-bats, or plate appearances, sorry. 252, 364, 467. 21 home runs, 51 extra base hits. 75 walks to 157 strikeouts, again, in 118 games for Kalai Rosario. 2 of 4 on stolen bases. He is a corner outfielder. He played most of the stuff in right, 6 games in left. Contact rate was only 67%. High power, corner outfield and first base option who strikes out a lot, walks a lot. It is Joey Gallo all over again. He went to the AFL, batted .214 with 7 home runs, but he won the home run derby. It's such an unusual profile. And the fact there's multiple guys in this system with the same profile is just really interesting to me because you had Emmanuel Rodriguez who had stupid high power, but a contact rate under 70%. I don't know what is in store for Kalai Rosario this year. I assume he goes to AA Wichita. He spent 118 games in Cedar Rapids. He needs to go to Wichita. But again, really curious, can he make enough contact? What's going to happen there? Our dart throw for this episode, right-hand pitcher Tanner Hall out of Southern Miss. The stuff doesn't blow you off the page, right? It's a 2-seamer, sits low 90s, can touch 94, slider, and a changeup. He's not your typical sinker-slider guy, though, because he much rather prefers the changeup to the slider. The slider's in the low 80s. It's not a bad pitch. But the thing about that changeup, in the same velocity band, also in the low 80s, is Tanner Hall, to me, has some of the best changeup control I have seen in a long time. He can spot that changeup anywhere he wants to, at any count, in any situation. I watched him do this in college. I watched, and it's really impressive. And I'm curious if a changeup sinker profile does different than a sinker slider profile. And I'm curious what he can do with time in this pitching development department if they can maybe get a little bit more velocity on there, maybe get a little bit more movement on the slider. Can you raise the ceiling on Tanner Hall? But he's a dude that can take lots of innings. He can go deep into games. He can handle a big workload and has the right attitude to be a starting pitcher who can just go out there and grind through a lineup 2 or 3 times. So curious to see what Tanner Hall is able to do this year with a full season in professional baseball. Fantastic week this week. Reminder, if there's a guy you wanted to hear about in the show that I didn't get to, let me know. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. We'll throw it into our Monday mailbag. Until next time, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.